Alright, so surprisingly, that just took one take. Beetlejuice from 1988. This is a classic film, man, and I watched this in the Autopsy of Jane Doe, like, the other night. I was kinda hoping that this one did win, but I do want to do Autopsy of Jane Doe also. It's a great movie I totally forgot about until I did that list, the Shudder's Countdown of the 101 Scariest Movie Moments. I'll have the second part of that out this coming week, early in the week. But what can you say about Beetlejuice? Now, I don't consider this a horror movie at all. That's why it hasn't made any top lists of mine or anything. This is a comedy with a little bit of nightmare fuel thrown in there, like most Tim Burton films. Now, I'm not a big Tim Burton fan. I don't care for his animated films. I've never been a big Nightmare Before Christmas fan. My sister was a huge fan of that movie growing up. The Corpse Bride, Frankenweenie, all those movies I really don't care for. This film, Mars Attacks, Sleepy Hollow, Batman from '89. I can't say I'm not a fan of Tim Burton. That would be totally incorrect. I think he's a phenomenal and visionary director. I'm just not a huge fan of his. I think his style of just everything looking trippy and surreal and stripes all over things, black and white, like that's his signature style. But I feel like it gets too much over the years in his work. But that style he uses, I think he did it best in this movie. This was only his second film. And the way that he mixes what starts off looking like a traditional movie, and then how it progresses and just starts getting more and more Tim Burton, like the Burton we know today, I think this is his best work. I think this is Tim Burton's best film. And Michael Keaton's performance, let's just say something about that. Michael Keaton in this movie has got to be one of the best performances in a film. Like, Keaton as Beetlejuice in this movie is just one of the most iconic performances in cinema history. Keaton's always been the type of person, I've heard this in interviews of people talking about Keaton, that he's just never happy with his performances. He absolutely kills this role. I can't picture anyone besides Keaton playing Beetlejuice. Now, we're getting a sequel next year, Beetlejuice 2. I don't know much about it. Like, I heard about it, but then when I watched this, I looked into it a little bit. So we got most people returning from the original here. So that'll be interesting, but who knows how it'll be. Now, Danny Elfman's score in this movie is absolutely brilliant. Like, what a piece of music the main theme is. Absolutely iconic. Probably my favorite score from Elfman, and he has done a lot of great scores. Now, aside from Keaton's amazing performance, everybody does a phenomenal job here. We have such a great cast in this. We have young Winona Ryder as Lydia. Great performance. We have Alec Baldwin, a much younger and skinnier Alec Baldwin, and Gina Davis playing Adam and Barbara, respectively. They both do a phenomenal job. I love Gina Davis. We were just talking Gina Davis in a premiere for something, but we all love Gina Davis, and she kills it in this movie too. Catherine O'Hara is a favorite of mine. She just absolutely lights the screen up every time she's on screen in any movie, and her playing the stepmother of Lydia here, where they can't stand each other. She's hysterical through this whole movie. Jeffrey Jones is Mr. Deetz in this. He does a great job too. Like, no one does a bad job in this movie. Even the woman, I forget who it is, in the afterlife, who smokes a cigarette, their caseworker. She's excellent too. All the effects work in this movie is top notch. Even if some of it does look a little tiny bit hokey for today, it still looks great, and you can attribute it to just it's Tim Burton style. So even if it does look out of place, some things, it's Tim Burton. So it gets a pass. The effects work also makes sense because I just read that there was $1 million effects budget for this movie, and Tim Burton realized how cheap that was for effects, which kind of worked in his favor, and he pretty much made a conscious decision for a lot of the effects work to look very B-movie-esque. So it makes sense. I also really love the fact that Beetlejuice's name is spelt like the star Beetlejuice that's in a nearby galaxy, and it's spelt Betelgeuse, if I'm correct. But the title of the film is spelt the way that it's pronounced, Beetlejuice. And I love all of that. They could have easily kept the name spelt the way that it is in the film and not make the title of the film spelt differently or anything like that. It just adds something to this movie for me. That is a gorgeous house, too, that they move into, Adam and Barbara at the beginning. Pretty sure it's Connecticut, right? Gorgeous house. Okay, so I had to check really quick because I know that Keaton improvised a lot of his lines in this film. So I looked it up just now. He actually ad-libbed 90% of the lines he has in this movie. That's unbelievable. Like, especially when you consider his performance as great as it is already. The fact that he improvised 90% of his lines in this just shows how genius Keaton is as an actor. There are so many great lines in this movie that just came off the top of his head while getting into character. And man, does Keaton get into the character of Beetlejuice in this movie. It's his favorite film that he ever did. His words. Alright, I gotta do it. As great as the car accident scene is, when they crash through the barn on that bridge, it looks like a barn, from swerving to hit the dog, and they're hanging, teetering in the car, and then the dog is shown on the board, and he's going up and down. That's great. Then they fall into the river and just die. It looked like they should have been able to get out of that car, like at multiple moments. I mean, Adam has his window open. They show it specifically when he looks out the window to look back at the dog. So he could just swim out of the window. Their death makes zero sense here. Well, whatever, it doesn't matter. I like when Barbara's fingers go on fire. I mean, it looks very obvious that they're holding a fake hand up, like the way they do it, but still, it looks really cool. The establishing shot, the exterior shot of the house here, with like the very late sunrise and the orange sky and stuff, that looks very good. So they find out that they died in the car crash. It's cool when she's showing like the objects in front of the mirror and they don't have a reflection. And remember when I said this isn't a horror movie? Still, the sandworms, I don't even remember how old I was when I saw this. This movie came out the year I was born. So probably a few years after that, those sandworms scared the shit out of me. And a few other shots and stuff in this movie always creeped me out as a kid. I also like how they mess around with time in this movie, implying that time doesn't work the same way in the afterlife. We see this multiple times through this movie. The first time when Adam goes outside to retrace his steps, they're wondering how they got back to the house after the crash before they realize that they're dead. And he goes outside and then we see the sandworm. Then she pulls him back into the house and says that he's been gone for 2 hours, even though for him it was like 5 seconds. They do that a lot in here and I really like that. Also, like later, when they're waiting for their caseworker, and it's been 3 months that they've been waiting, so they come back to the house and all the furniture's gone and everything, because for them it did not feel that long. All of that's great. I love how they get a handbook for the afterlife when they die. That's so funny. All the usage of Harry Belafonte's music in this movie, what a perfect decision. And I'm pretty sure for the Deo Banana Boat scene at the dinner table, I'm pretty sure Tim Burton didn't want to use that song, but Catherine O'Hara and Jeffrey Jones both said it has to be like a Calypso song, and so they pretty much chose the music for that iconic scene, if I recall correctly, but I'm pretty sure Catherine O'Hara had something to do with it, and Jeffrey Jones. But can you imagine this movie without that scene? Because I can't. Delia, Deetz, that's Catherine O'Hara's character. For some reason, I always think of Bedelia from Creepshow, from the Father's Day segment. And I want my cake, and Bedelia is her name. For some reason, I always think Bedelia, but it's Delia. Alright, as much as I love Lydia and stuff, there is no fucking way those movers picked her up sitting in the couch and brought the couch into the house with her sitting on it. There's no way any normal person is going to be like, excuse me, we got to move this. Can you get off the chair, please? Oh, why can't I remember the actor's name who plays Otho? It's something Sadix or Sadix. I can't think of his fucking name. He does phenomenal in this movie, too. He has one of the best parts of this movie. We'll get to that. Glenn Shadix. I had to look it up. It was driving me nuts. So I was a letter off. I said Sadix, it's Shadix. Awesome in this movie. So the Deetzes are moving in and they want to alter this entire house, which is Adam and Barbara's. So they're trying to scare the shit out of them and get them out of this house. And I love the scene when they just open the door and they're looking around the house. Barbara's holding Adam's head and she's holding a knife and they don't see them. Great stuff. I gotta say though, the stop motion on the sandworm still looks great. Like the stop motion really looks good here. And that's the thing with stop motion. There are some very good usages of it. Back in like early 80s to late 80s, Basket Case comes to mind. As ridiculous as it might look, I think the stop motion for Belial and Basket Case looks great to this day. Sure, it looks stop motion-y because it is, and it looks cheap because it probably was, but it still looks good. But this looks so much better. Like, this really stood the test of time. And again, because it's Tim Burton and his crazy style, that it's more acceptable, I think. That it aged better just because it's Tim Burton. So you expect these type of effects from Tim Burton. I don't know how the whole rules of Beetlejuice work. I mean, you're supposed to say his name 3 times to free him, right? But then no one says his name, no one even knows who he is. And yet he's able to control the TV and put a commercial for himself on there. So I don't know how it works. Isn't he supposed to be trapped until people summon him by saying his name 3 times? But yet he's able to still manipulate things and stuff. So I don't know like exactly what's up with Beetlejuice and why he's trapped and how he got trapped. Or I forget if they even mention that. I don't think they do. But it doesn't really make sense. Let me also say the whole model of the town that Adam builds in the attic. Both the actual model and the scenes when they get sucked into the model in a little bit to talk to Beetlejuice looks fantastic. Then they draw the door, knock on it, and then it gets all Tim Burton. Like, these are the scenes that, like, he really shines with his whole style here. We see the woman with the green skin, and she's explaining to them, Juno, that's the caseworker. The smoking woman. She's so funny. Now, we see all the people dead here, and they're waiting because they have an appointment. And Adam and Barbara, they're new to this whole death thing. So they didn't know they had to make an appointment. They don't even know what they're making an appointment for or anything. But they're showing off how everyone died. Like when she asks Adam, is this what happens when you die? And the lady interrupts and says, this is what happens when you die. That's what happens when he dies. All that's great. But we see the shrunken head man here. Now, he's at the end of the movie, still waiting. They get seen first. So how is he still waiting for his appointment at the end of the movie? Like, unless he's there again? But she says that you only get, like, in 125 years on Earth, you get 3, like, help me consultations. So I don't know if that guy's just been waiting there forever, but it doesn't make sense because they get seen way early on in the movie. He's here waiting before them. And then he's still waiting later at the end. Then Juno gives the whole backstory of Beetlejuice. That he used to be her assistant, then he was making trouble, of course, because he's a troublemaker, and he went on to open his own freelance bioexorcism company, I guess. And she tells them how to bring him back, even though she says, like, don't mess with him, like, he's only going to be trouble. Then she goes on and says, like, just all you need to do is say his name 3 times. Why tell them that at all if, like, he's such a menace? And then they ask her, like, what if we need to get in touch with you, like Juno, again? Like, how do we do that? Which seems like the much better idea than what she just laid down about Beetlejuice. And then she just puffs on a cigarette and vanishes. She can't give the answer on how to reach her, which in her words would be a lot more safe than telling them how to summon Beetlejuice. I don't know. I love when they put the sheets on to try to scare the Deetzes. And she says, oh, they're just sheets, it's not scary, or something like that. And Adam says, think of them as death shrouds. That's a great line. Maybe they're just not horror fans. But how the fuck have Adam and Barbara never heard of the movie Night of the Living Dead? Lydia brings it up, says, what do you look like under there? Are you all disgusting like Night of the Living Dead? And he says, Night of the Living what? And freaks out. They've never heard of the movie Night of the Living Dead? I don't know about that. So they go into the model town and end up talking to Beetlejuice, which every line of dialogue is perfect from Keaton here. Every single line, with him just kissing Barbara, like, and him saying, like, you guys picked me. You didn't have to, but you picked me. I just want to kiss you. And then he keeps on, like, harassing Barbara, like, almost, like, pretty much sexual abuse. But everything that he has to say in this whole scene is fantastic. So then we get the dinner scene, which, again, is just one of the most iconic scenes of this movie, and probably my favorite scene. But the line that Otho gives before they start the whole Deo thing, it's one of the best lines of this movie. When he's getting shit from, I forget who she is, the black-haired skinny woman, and she says that, oh, paranormal investigators or something like that, like that's what they call your type nowadays. And Otho says, don't mind her, she's still upset that someone dropped a house on her sister. That is such a great comeback, and what a great Wizard of Oz reference. I love Charles's toast when they're talking about the ghosts and everything, and he's trying to change the subject, and he says, you know, let's give a toast to our friends who braved the Cross Bronx Expressway to get here. You gotta be from New York or the Northeast to know the Cross Bronx Expressway, but traffic, always. Then we get the Deo song, and Catherine O'Hara's expressions, man, when she starts up with the song, the way that she looks confused as hell of the voice coming out of her, but at the same time she's getting into it, and then they all start doing that. Like, they all seem very confused, but they're also super into it also. And when Otho grabs the ice bucket and starts smacking up, that kills me every single time. What a fantastic, iconic scene. There's nothing else to really say about it. Hide the deadly black tarantula. Then the shrimp coming up and grabbing their faces. They all get pushed back. What a great scene, man. I mean, just to think of something like this shows Tim Burton's genius. Like, even if he didn't want to use this song specifically, just the whole idea of getting possessed by ghosts and being forced to do a calypso song. You don't see that often, like, at all. So, I mean, just kudos to everyone involved. And this doesn't scare the Deetzes away. This just makes them more interested in the ghosts here. So their plan didn't work at all. Beetlejuice with the spikes sticking out of him, that looks fantastic. And then the whole strip joint and stuff. Let me say this, too. You know that you created an absolute iconic character when they're only in the movie that is named after them for 15 minutes. He's only in this movie for 15 minutes of its hour-and-a-half runtime. That's something. Like, that's really impressive. Anytime anyone can make a character that's only in a film for a short amount of time of its runtime, and they just become the most iconic thing about the movie, you know you struck gold. They're spending a lot of their 3 help sessions and stuff very early on in their deaths. In the afterlife, because they go to talk to Juno again and the football team there. That's all great stuff. But this is the second time now that they've talked to Juno. So don't they just get one more for another 125 years? Like, what if some big event comes and they really need a help? Then they're screwed. Alright, the way that they try to creep them out next when they're showing the faces to Juno, and Adam ends up, pulling his face and the eyes on his fingers, and she opens her mouth and the eyes roll into her mouth. That looks fantastic. Like, even if it does look, like I said, like schlocky B-movie, it looks so Tim Burton, it's not even funny. The whole scene with Lydia meeting Beetlejuice, and then the charades they gotta play to get her to know his name. But when she first asks, like, what's your name? He's like, well, I can't tell you, because if I tell you, then you'll tell your friends. I'll end up at shopping centers and stuff. All of that is great. Now, 2 questions. The handbook, the Afterlife handbook, Otho has it now. Wouldn't that be, like, just like them being dead, Adam and Barbara, they're ghosts. So isn't the handbook also like a ghost thing? How can Otho hold the book and carry the book is my question. I get Lydia maybe can, like when she first finds it, because she could see Adam and Barbara, like from the get-go. But isn't it like a paranormal object, the handbook? So how does Otho get it? I don't understand that. And then question number 2. How does she not get juice instantly when he does the second part of his name and the orange juice container starts appearing and pouring? How does she not just say juice immediately? She goes with breakfast. If anyone showed me and we were playing charades and they showed orange juice being poured, the first thing I'm thinking of is juice. So I don't know. Well, Lydia's a little slow, I guess. Another image that used to spook the shit out of me when I was a kid was when, Otho starts doing his thing and the ghost of Adam and Barbara appears, and then they start aging real fast and his jaw falls off. All of that is very well done, and it's still creepy to this day. And then Lydia ends up summoning Beetlejuice, and his line, "It's showtime." Another great effect and everything is when he appears and he starts turning into the carnival game with the 2 big hammer arms. That he smacks it down and those 2 people go flying through the roof. They're fucking dead, right? Like, there's no way they survive that. That is why I won't do 2 shows a week anymore, babe. I won't do them. The 2 pieces of art, those iconic pieces of art, man, I wonder who owns them. Like, I'm sure they survived the production of the movie and everything, and somebody owns those 2 iconic statues. More so, I love the one that, the arms, for lack of a better term, come together, and this part comes in. I would love to own that. I gotta look into who owns it. Beetlejuice goes to try to marry Lydia, and I love how the door grows, and the little skeleton, alien, whatever looking creature comes, and he's the guy that's gonna wed them. Tim Burton has a thing for crooked door frames. Well, you see that in a lot of his movies. Just the doors are just always purposely crooked and unnatural looking. It looks fantastic here. I love how Barbara starts trying to say his name, says Beetlejuice, and he throws the zipper at her face as she unzips it, says his name again. He does the big wind up and throws the metal plate on her mouth. That used to creep me out too, the image of having a metal plate sealed to your face and not being able to get it off or talk. There is some horrific imagery in here, like I said, but it's still a full-on comedy to me. And then Beetlejuice gets taken out by the sandworm, which how the fuck did Barbara get on top of that sandworm? I know it's not a big important question, but how did she get on top of it to ride it like a horse? Through the ceiling of the house? I don't know. Just again, what a perfect ending song for this movie. Sounds like Lydia got an A on the math test. Now, I get she's floating in the air or stuff like that, but do you really need anyone to do this for you? This is what she wanted for getting an A on her math test, is to float in the air singing Harry Belafonte. Can't she just throw a record on? They have the record because they were listening to the Banana Boat song, Adam and Barbara in the Attic, very early on. Can't they just throw on the album and she could lip sync and dance around the house? Why does she need any paranormal assistance in doing this is my point. But whatever, it's still such a great ending. And then Beetlejuice is in the waiting room and being his trickery self. The shrunken head dude's still there, like I said. So has he been waiting this whole time? That's a long time to wait. But then we see Beetlejuice's number and it's 9 million or something. He's going to be there forever, so that he tries tricking the shaman. And, honestly, if I was looking at that long-ass number and he was the next one, the shaman, I'd probably do the same thing. I'd probably bank and hope that maybe this guy doesn't speak English or can't read or something. I'd just take his number 4, get ready to go, and then he gets his head shrunken. Beetlejuice, 1988. Such a classic, such an amazing film. Wherever you're from, hope you're having a good morning, afternoon, or night. I will talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.